Hello and welcome to another episode of Chuchu is a Ranker, and on this episode we are going to be discussing the discography of the English rock band I Like Trains. Hailing from Leeds, I Like Trains formed in 2004 and consists of David Martin on vocals and guitar, Guy Bannister on guitars and synths, Alistair Bowis on bass and Simon Fogel on drums. The band came to the fore during the post-punk revival movement of the early 2000s that came in the wake of Interpol's seminal Turn on the Bright Lights LP. That movement also saw the likes of Editors, The Twilight Sad and many others making their mark on the British post-punk scene. Whilst I Like Trains have never achieved the same level of success as bands like Editors or White Lies, they still caught a niche but fervent cult following and have gone on to record 4 albums and a soundtrack LP. Speaking of that soundtrack LP, that was a companion piece to the 2016 documentary movie A Divorce Before Marriage, which was actually about the band and their struggles with balancing their careers, family and music. I won't be covering that soundtrack here as I'm sticking to the band's core albums, but I will say that it does its job as a slice of background ambient music. If you want the band's best instrumental only release though, I recommend the Christmas Tree Ship EP from 2008, that's pretty damn good. And as for my own fandom, yeah, I love I Like Trains, they have been one of my favourite indie bands from the last 20 years. So, without further ado, let's be complete rankers and rank up a storm. These are the studio albums of I Like Trains ranked from worst to best. So, we're going to be kicking off this list with Progress Reform from 2006, which was the band's debut mini-album / EP. Now usually I wouldn't cover EPs or mini-albums on this show, but Progress Reform was a very important release for I Like Trains that remains the band's most popular and iconic record. So not to feature it would be a bit daft. And what we have here is a 7-song, 32-minute gothic delight of a debut that sets up the template for the band's first full-length LP that followed in 2007. And just like his successor, most of the songs on Progress Reform are based upon tragic moments from history. It also shares the same gothic textures as the following full-length album, sounding like it's 1 part Interpol, 2 parts Joy Division with dashes of Nick Cave and The Cure mixed in. And it's pretty great, maintaining a good level of quality the whole way through and throwing up a couple of the band's best ever tunes, most notably via the singles Terra Nova and A Rook House for Bobby. So with all this goodness on display, why is Progress Reform coming in last, I hear you cry? Well, basically it comes down to the similarities it shares with the debut LP proper, Elegies to Lessons Learned. As good as Progress Reform is, it still feels a little slight due to its brevity. So when I get in the mood to dive into the darkness of the band's early era, I pretty much always choose the depth of Elegies to Lessons Learned over Progress Reform. That LP just has more meat on the bone, as it were. And that leaves this mini LP in a kind of precarious place where I just don't choose to listen to it all that often, despite it actually being rather good. I mean, track to track, there's just nothing to complain about. Opener Terra Nova is one of the band's most kick-ass tunes, its hopeless tales of Captain Scott's disastrous Arctic journey exploding into a mosh-inducing rock assault at the climax. A Rook House for Bobby is amazing, its chest-inflected tragedy lyrics bolstered by a super catchy chorus. While the band's debut single, Stainless Steel, is an epic 8-minute banger that is full of images of cheating and murder as the instrumentation gradually builds up into a gothic roar. But even the slower, more maudlin pieces work well. No Military Parade is kissed by some softly lilting strings. Citizens has a wall of reverb-heavy shoegaze guitar enforcing its thick atmosphere. The Accident tells of a poisoning gone wrong over icy piano lines, while Closer The Beaching Report catches the attention with its ghostly vocal chants. So yeah, despite coming in last place, Progress Reform is an excellent start from I Like Trains that sets out their stall very nicely and alerts you to just how much potential they have. 4 stars. Next up we have The Shallows from 2012, which was the band's third LP. And here we have a concept album that was inspired by a book of the same title written by the American journalist Nicholas G. Carr. That book was about the effects of the internet on the brain and basically how it makes society dumber. Now, hands in the air, I have not read that book and I know very little about it, but it was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize, so I guess it must be a worthwhile read. Quite how that theme and concept is reflected in the album's content, I'm sure I couldn't tell you. But what I can tell you is that this LP sees the band move in a more synth-heavy direction and almost entirely revolves around grand sweeping ballads. And as such, there's a really languorous and emotive feel to the record. The entire piece feels like a gentle, extended sigh of resignation. The album is also notable for being the least gothic sounding or abrasive of the band's work. It is by far the most overtly melodic release in their catalogue. And as such it could arguably be touted as the group's most accessible record. It's also very strong in the quality department and just doesn't put a foot wrong. Highlights on a slightly sad autumnal sounding release includes the opening Beacons, which shows off the more accessible bent of the record with its melodic synths and easy chorus. Lead single Nemosini sends the band off towards the indie disco with its clipped riffs and danceable rhythms. The Hive slowly gathers pace, building up from a gently twinkling ballad into walls of undulating guitar shimmer. The Turning of the Bones is one of my favourites by the band, its melancholic romanticism going straight for the emotive jugular, as David Martin croons, "Weave me into your branches, I belong here, tonight we wake the dead. As sure as the river bleeds into the sea, I will drink myself into your wooden arms, and we will dance ourselves to sleep." Reykjavik meanwhile acts as the linchpin of the record, its 6-minute plus ballad having a sense of elegant grandiosity about it. While We Used to Talk makes for a nice late album single with its icy synth textures and dramatically catchy guitar riff. So yeah, The Shallows is a great album that catches our like trains in their softest of moods. And it's that gentleness and the appealing application of synths which gives the record its central charm point. As for why this ranks here, well, that's just a case of personal preference. I really like this album and I don't really have any complaints relating to it. I mean, maybe it could have used just a touch more energy in certain places, but I still like it exactly the way it is, so it simply comes down to the fact that I just like the records above it a little bit more. 4 stars. Coming in next we have Kompromat from 2020, which was the band's 4th LP and most recent to date. And here we find the band heading in almost a total polar opposite of their previous album The Shallows. As we just discussed, that album was very gentle and elegant, soaked in a kind of well-weary resigned sadness. But it also felt so defeated that it had no energy left to do anything about it. The entire album felt like the world falling to pieces while you took a long nap just to get away from it all. Kompromat, on the other hand, feels like grabbing a baseball bat and running headfirst into the fray to mete out some justice. This is easily the band's most snarling and angry work. It's an album dedicated to lambasting crooked politicians, shady government dealings and broken campaign promises. This entire album feels like the inevitable disappointment and fury that shortly follows an election, as you realise that things are going to stay either exactly the same or just get worse. Of course, it bears to remember that this LP was released in 2020, a year when Trump was still the US president during his original term and the coronavirus had burst out onto the world stage to fuck around with everyone and everything. So at that time this album felt totally vital, that it was summing up that year's hellscape very nicely indeed. Coming back to it now in 2025, and Trump's back in charge and worse than ever, there's mechanised warfare in Central Europe and US sanctioned genocide happening in the Middle East. So the whole world has gone to hell in a handbasket. And guess what? This album feels very relevant and vital once again. To augment the feelings of anger and finger-wagging, the band have also set aside the balladeering of The Shallows here, instead conjuring up a set of driving post-punk tunes that use pace and energy to get their glowering points across. And it works really well, with the album feeling pointed, cohesive and on the cusp of revolutionary violence. As for highlights, well, it's not really that kind of album, as the entire package feels like a homogenized singular scream of political rage. But a few cherry picks would include the opener, A Steady Hand, which kicks things off as they mean to go on, with a thumping State of the Nation type song that features abrasive screaming feedback squalls that make the track feel a little unnerving. Dig In, on the other hand, positively leaps out of the speakers with a slick indie pop energy and effusive catchy chorus. It's a pretty obvious single. A Man of Conviction snatches the attention with its beautiful Interpol-esque instrumental break and ominous allusions to bodies piling up in basements. While The Truth is the album's masterpiece moment that sees the band storming through a 6-minute indie disco banger as Dave Martin reels off an impressive cavalcade of lyrics about what exactly the truth is, which is incredibly cool and ultimately leaves you wanting to murder the nearest spin doctor, with Dave hilariously purring at one point, "The truth is a moot point. Cry me a river." But yeah, you can't go wrong with anything on this, from the moody post-punk of Patience is a Virtue, to the rhythmic Desire is a Mess, to the creepy AI voice on Closer, Eyes to the Left. It's all really badass, energetic and very pertinent stuff. 4 stars.
I don't know what I'm doing, and I've been scratching around for some way to say it. The truth is a liquid lunch. The truth is your privacy is important to us. The truth is all of the above. Delete as applicable.
Coming in next, we have Elegies to Lessons Learnt from 2007, which was the band's debut full-length LP. And here the band follow closely in the footsteps of their debut EP/mini album Progress Reform, crafting a deeply gothic record that's dedicated to miserable failures or disasters in history. It's a really dark, discordant and oppressive album that shares some obvious DNA with The Cure's Pornography. The record is also notable for having a very steady, kind of dirgy pace. The entire LP seems to be perpetually stuck in waltz time for some reason. I know some people don't like that about Elegies to Lessons Learnt, but I personally think that it adds to the record's Victorian funeral atmosphere, and it helps the tracklist coalesce into a super cohesive whole. And that cohesion helps paper over the odd lull. Tracks like Death of an Idealist or Come Over aren't particularly strong tunes, but within the context of such a cohesive record, they do their job of reinforcing and furthering the mood and atmosphere of the piece. That said, there are plenty of bangers to savour too. Highlights on a stacked gothic slice of pitch-black misery includes the epic and theatrical opener We All Fall Down, which does the whole gradually building walls of dissonant guitar thing while spewing tales of the Black Death, which at one point killed off a third of everyone living in Europe. 25 Sins is a cool rocker that makes reference to the Great Fire of London in 1666 and features a rare squealing guitar solo. The Deception is great with its melancholy walls of distortion and tales of a sailor who tried to cheat during an around-the-world race, only to go nuts and commit suicide while out at sea, which led to some national shame back in England. Remnants of an Army strips things back to a bare minimum, as Dave Martin laments the disastrous British retreat from Kabul in 1842, sighing, "Another fine mess, as our empire falls on its own rusted sword." We Go Hunting ramps up the energy with its rolling drum attack and catchy ode to the Salem witch trials. Spencer Percival, meanwhile, is rad. It's 9-minute plus gothic opus sucking you in with its swirling atmosphere, siren guitar bends and rocking climax. The fact that the song details the only assassination of a British Prime Minister through the eyes of his murderer is just the icing on the cake. While Closer, Death is the End, is a brilliant piano dirge that ascends into a profoundly cathartic funeral march that feels ridiculously epic and bursting with pointed finality. It's one hell of a way to end the record. So yeah, Elegies to Lessons Learned is a superb album of gothic rock that runs as dark as it gets and boasts an infallible overall atmosphere. 4.5 stars. So here we are at the top of the mountain, and the I Like Trains gold medal is going to go to He Who Saw the Deep from 2010, which was the band's second LP. And here the band changed tact away from the overtly gothic soundscapes of their debut and into more standardised jangly indie rock territory. Now that might not sound like an overly inspired move, but the band have gone about it in a fantastic way here, crafting a kind of concept album where every song is somehow connected to the theme of the sea. This aspect often bleeds over into the musical texture of the record too, with many tracks having a Piscean feel to them, or guitars that rise and ebb like the coming and going of waves. And this results in a really cool briny atmosphere that once again leads to a really cohesive package of songs that feel like they all belong together and add up to a singular piece. The band have also broken free of their rather odd dependence on waltz time arrangements that defined their debut. Here the time signatures have a lot more variety, speeding up and slowing down with a natural rhythm. As much as I love Elegies to Lessons Learned, I think I might have thrown myself overboard the nearest ship and into the jaws of a kraken if the band had made another really slow-paced record like that. I mean, I love that record, but yeah, one is enough. But the real kicker here on He Who Saw the Deep is simply the song-to-song quality, which is flawless. There are 11 songs on this LP and I love every one of them, to the point where this is one of my very favourite albums of the 2010s. Highlights from a sea-swept indie rock masterpiece includes the semi-title track We Saw the Deep, which is a gigantic, grandiose ballad that feels like sinking into an ocean of luxurious velvet, with Dave's baritone voice adding exponentially to the elegance of the tune. Progress as a Snake is fantastic, the track's ever-building percussion section giving the tune a thumping energy, as Dave growls of Europe sinking into the sea. Talking of energy, the driving bass of These Feet of Clay is also full of strident power, even as its delectable touches of strings seek to add some grandeur to the proceedings. Broken Bones, on the other hand, uses quietness and space to tease out the maximum amount of sadness from its tales of a giant tsunami wiping mankind off the face of the earth, as Dave mourns, I turn to face the cold embrace of some forgotten sea, as we climb mountains to buy ourselves time. While Sea of Regrets is my favourite tune by the band. It's a brilliantly tender ballad that's as beautiful and grandiose as the ocean is wide. The way it slowly gathers pace into its catchy refrain really reminds me of Olympian by Gene. Plus that serpentine outro is just absolutely gorgeous. Mwah! Chef's kiss, I just love that song. But yeah, you can't go wrong with anything on this record. From the churning stormy guitars of the opener, When We Were Kings, to the quiet surrender and self-doubt of Hope Is Not Enough, to the sleek rhythmic swagger of Sirens, to the shimmering misery of A Divorce Before Marriage, to the jangly indie pop of A Father's Son, it's all really awesome and emotionally salient stuff. 5 stars! So, now my deep dive is finished, the question remains, did I gain more appreciation for the artist? And the answer this time is no, not really. But only because I've heard all of these records like a billion times and I know every single nook and cranny of them. I mean, what can I say, I'm just a huge fan of the band and I hope they get off their asses soon and give us some more new music. And that's my list, but of course I know that's not your list, so why not sound off in the comments and tell me how you'd rank these records. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe and all that other kind of YouTube jazz. Make sure to take care of yourself, but most importantly, just keep on ranking.